Okay, so Russia just launched one of their hypersonic missiles at Ukraine,
Yeah,
and that's definitely got people talking and a little nervous.
for sure.
We're diving into some analysis from the BBC today,
Okay.
where they talked to Melinda Herring.
Right.
Now, she's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council
Right.
and a total expert on Ukraine.
Gotcha.
So we really want to break this down and figure out,
Yeah.
is this missile a game changer?
Mm-hmm.
Is Putin just trying to scare everyone?
Okay.
Or is it something else entirely? Then
Yeah.
we'll look at what it means for the West and what it means for the future of this war.
Gotcha.
I mean, just looking at the basic facts of this thing,
Yeah.
it flew for 15 minutes at Mach 11,
Wow.
hit Dnipro,
Okay.
and has a range of like 3,000 miles,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
So you see those headlines
Right.
and you kind of freak out a little, right?
Yeah.
It seems like things have escalated pretty quickly.
Well, you have to remember that Russia has already used nuclear-capable missiles in Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
This isn't their first time.
So this isn't really new.
Not completely.
But this one is hypersonic.
Exactly.
So for those of us who maybe aren't missile experts, what does that even mean?
So basically, a hypersonic missile travels at least 5 times the speed of sound.
Okay.
So it's incredibly difficult to track
Gotcha.
and incredibly difficult to intercept.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah. I see why people are freaking out now.
yeah, I mean, it could actually change warfare as we know it
Wow.
because, defenses just aren't really designed to handle something moving that fast.
Right.
You know?
So along with this new missile,
Mm.
we also have some pretty strong words from Putin,
Right.
basically saying any country sending weapons to Ukraine is fair game for Russia.
Yeah.
He's looking at you, U.S. and U.K.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like this is a direct response to Ukraine using those long-range missiles we've been sending them.
Yeah, it definitely seems connected.
Putin's been warning the West for a while now.
For months.
But this statement feels different.
Yeah, there's a shift in tone for sure.
It's a lot more serious, a lot more direct.
Yeah.
Like he's drawing a line in the sand.
Exactly.
Melinda Herring actually used a really interesting analogy.
Oh, yeah?
She described Putin as a car with no brakes.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
I know, right?
So no signs of slowing down.
Just moving forward.
It makes you wonder what he's thinking, what he's planning next.
Yeah, like, is this really a threat of, like, all-out war?
Mm-hmm.
Or is he just bluffing to see how far he can push the West?
Well, according to Melinda Herring,
Okay.
she thinks he is testing the West.
Okay.
He's trying to scare them into backing down from supporting Ukraine.
I see.
And it kind of fits the pattern.
Okay.
He's made nuclear threats before,
Right.
throughout the war, but he hasn't followed through.
So maybe he's playing chicken, hoping the West will back down first.
It's a risky strategy,
Yeah.
but it's not out of the question.
And we also have to think about how Ukraine only has a limited supply of those long-range missiles.
That's a good point.
It's not an endless amount, and Putin knows that.
Right.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Melinda Herring suggested that Putin might be playing the long game here,
Oh.
like waiting to see if Trump gets back into the White House,
Okay.
hoping for a better deal on Ukraine.
Interesting.
She pointed out that the current administration under Biden
Mm-hmm.
isn't likely to suddenly change its stance on Ukraine before the next election.
Okay.
So Putin might be betting on a change in U.S. leadership,
I see.
which could lead to a shift in policy.
Interesting. So he's just biding his time.
Maybe, but what does all this mean for Ukraine right now?
Yeah.
They're already fighting a tough battle on the eastern front lines.
Mm-hmm.
How does this new missile and the escalating tension with Russia,
Yeah.
how does that impact things on the ground?
Well, it's a really difficult situation already.
Right.
And this new development definitely doesn't make it any easier.
I imagine not.
Their troops are facing huge challenges,
Yeah.
especially with the presence of North Korean soldiers fighting with Russian forces.
But wait, North Korean soldiers?
There are over 11,000 of them on the ground in Ukraine.
Wow.
It's hard to say how effective they'll be.
Right.
They haven't seen active warfare since the 1950s.
Wow. That's a long time.
But their presence just adds another layer of complexity to the situation.
Okay, so we've got this new hypersonic missile, Putin's warnings to the West,
Right?
and now North Korean soldiers in the mix.
Yep.
What does all of this mean for Ukraine's chances of actually holding on?
Well, Melinda Herring thinks that 2025 could be a make-or-break year for them.
Okay.
A lot will depend on if the U.S. keeps supporting them,
Right.
especially with the U.S. election coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to think about the roles of other countries,
Okay.
both in Europe and in Asia.
So the whole international community really needs to step up.
Basically, their response to this situation is going to be crucial in deciding what happens next.
Wow, there's a lot going on here.
It's a lot.
We went from hypersonic missiles to North Korean soldiers to U.S. selections.
Yeah?
It's a lot to process.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is in this conflict.
Yeah.
Decisions in Washington or Moscow can have these ripple effects
hmm
all the way to the front lines of Ukraine and beyond.
It's pretty scary when you think about it.
Yeah, the choices made in the coming months, they
Yeah.
could have huge consequences,
Yeah.
not only for the future of this war,
Right.
but for global security as a whole.
Okay. I think we all need a moment to process all of that.
Deep breaths.
We've unpackaged this potential threat of this new hypersonic missile.
Right.
We looked at Putin's motives and
Mm.
what impact it's having on Ukraine.
Yeah.
But we need to think about what the West should do next.
Yeah.
Should we keep sending Ukraine those long-range missiles,
Mm-hmm.
even if it means provoking Russia even more?
Right.
Or is there another option here?
Yeah. Tough question. Yeah, that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
You know, we want to support Ukraine and their right to defend themselves,
Right.
but we also don't want to trigger an even wider conflict.
Exactly. It feels like we're walking this tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to help Ukraine without pushing Putin into doing something even more reckless.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for sure.
And we're dealing with real-world consequences here.
Right.
People's lives are at stake.
Absolutely.
We can't forget that.
Yeah, it's not just about politics and strategy.
Right.
This is about real people.
Exactly. And all of this is happening
Mhm.
with all this political maneuvering going on in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Remember what Melinda Herring said about Putin waiting for a change in U.S. leadership?
Oh, right. Yeah.
It makes you think he's really playing the long game here.
He is like a chess player, thinking several moves ahead,
Yeah.
trying to anticipate what his opponents are going to do.
It's kind of chilling when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what his end goal even is.
Right.
What is he really trying to achieve here?
Is it about restoring Russia's past glory or expanding their territory?
Right. Or maybe he just wants to flex his muscles on the world stage.
Yeah, it's probably a mix of all those things, to be honest. It's like this tangled web of historical grievances, political ambitions,
Right.
maybe even a bit of personal ego.
Yeah.
But if we can figure out those motivations,
Mm.
then we can understand how this conflict might unfold.
Okay.
And then maybe the West can take steps to minimize the risks.
I mean, this whole situation just really shows how interconnected the world is.
It does.
Like, the outcome of a U.S. election could have a massive impact on a war happening thousands of miles away.
Right. That's globalization in action, what happens in one part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It can set off a chain reaction across the globe.
Yeah,
And the Russia-Ukraine war is the perfect example of that.
it really is.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize how important international cooperation is. We can't tackle these kinds of problems alone.
No, it takes a coordinated effort from the global community to make any real difference.
But that's where things get complicated, right?
Oh, yeah.
All these different countries have their own interests, their own
Mhm.
priorities.
Yeah.
And some are more willing to get involved than others.
Right. And we saw that early on in the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how some countries jumped in right away with military aid?
Yeah.
While others were more cautious?
Right. They were worried about provoking Russia.
Exactly. And that's probably going to continue as the situation changes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So building a united front against Russia,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take some very careful diplomacy.
Right.
And everyone needs to understand what's at stake here.
Okay, so what about China?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
They've mostly stayed out of it so far,
Yeah, they have.
but do you think they might get more involved in the future?
That's hard to say. China and Russia have a complicated relationship.
Hmm.
Any move they make could have huge consequences.
Right, because they're a major player on the world stage.
Exactly. It's like we're watching this giant game of risk play out.
Yeah,
All these different countries,
right.
all these different powers,
Mhm.
vying for power and influence.
Except the stakes in this game are incredibly high.
They are.
One wrong move could be devastating.
For everyone.
We're talking about a potential world war here,
It's true.
something that could affect us for generations.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And we shouldn't take it lightly.
No, we need to understand how complex this conflict is,
Yeah.
the motivations of all the different players,
Right.
and the potential consequences of different actions.
Exactly. That's the only way to navigate this whole thing.
It is really hard to wrap your head around all of it.
It is. There's a lot to unpack.
But it's important that we have these conversations.
Yeah.
Try to make sense of this constantly changing situation.
Right. We need to arm ourselves with knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. And with all the information coming at us all the time, it's more important than ever to cut through the noise and focus on what really matters.
I completely agree.
We've been talking a lot about the high-level strategies and the politics,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember the human cost of this conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
There are real people caught in the crossfire.
We can't lose sight of that.
We can't.
Behind all the headlines, all the political analysis,
Yeah.
there are millions of people whose lives have been changed forever.
Right.
Families torn apart, homes destroyed, futures uncertain.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't some abstract game.
No.
This is a conflict with real human consequences.
And those consequences will be felt for a long time.
Yeah. Long after the fighting stops.
Right. The trauma of war, the loss of loved ones,
Mm.
the displacement from their homes and communities.
Right.
Those wounds take generations to heal.
And it's not just Ukrainians who are suffering either.
Right.
This war has impacted the whole globe.
It has.
It's caused energy prices to rise, food shortages,
Yeah.
and even increased political tensions.
Across the world.
It shows how interconnected our world really is,
It does.
and how the consequences of a conflict can reach far beyond the actual battlefield.
Right. It reinforces this idea that we're all part of a global community.
Yeah.
And what happens in one part of the world affects us all.
So shouldn't that sense of shared humanity inspire us to work towards peace?
It should.
A world where we resolve conflict through dialogue and diplomacy,
Yeah.
not through violence and destruction?
Absolutely. It's a lofty goal,
It is.
but it's one worth striving for.
I think so too.
You know, we all share this planet,
Mm-hmm.
and our faiths are intertwined.
Right.
That shared humanity should be the foundation
Yeah.
for a more peaceful and prosperous future.
For everyone.
For everyone.
We've talked about the military side of this conflict,
Yeah.
the political maneuvering, the human cost,
Yeah.
and the broader global implications.
We've also touched on the importance of critical thinking,
Right.
media literacy,
Yeah.
global citizenship.
Yeah,
All important when you're trying to understand this complex situation.
they are, but there's one more thing we need to think about.
Okay.
The role of information,
Oh, yeah.
how it shapes public perception and influences the war.
That's a great point.
In this age of 2047 news and social media,
Right.
it's so hard to know what's true and what's not.
It is. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Exactly, which is why it's so important to think critically,
Yes.
evaluate our sources, be aware of our own biases.
Absolutely.
Because information can be a weapon.
It can.
It can manipulate public opinion,
Yeah.
sow discord,
Right?
and advance certain political agendas.
And we've seen that happening in this conflict.
Yeah.
Both sides are using propaganda
Mhm.
and disinformation
Right.
to control the narrative.
And try to win over the public.
Exactly. It's like a battle for hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Happening at the same time as the actual fighting.
Exactly, which is why media literacy is so crucial.
It is. Being able to critically evaluate information,
Right.
recognize bias,
Mm.
spot propaganda.
It's essential to forming your own opinions.
You also have to be open to different perspectives,
Okay.
different narratives,
Yeah.
because the truth is usually complicated,
Right.
and it rarely fits into those simple stories we're given.
Yeah, that's true.
So as we continue trying to understand this conflict,
Mm-hmm.
let's all try to be more discerning
Right.
with the information we consume,
Yeah.
seek out different viewpoints,
Okay.
and engage in thoughtful discussion.
I like that.
Okay, let's shift gears for a second.
Yeah.
Let's talk about technology's role in all of this.
Okay.
We talked about the hypersonic missile,
We did.
but it goes way beyond that.
Right.
From sophisticated cyber attacks
Mhm.
to how information is spread on social media.
Right.
Technology has had a major impact on how this war is being fought.
Yeah, you're right. Technology has become this integral part of modern warfare.
It has.
It's not just about weapons anymore. Social media and these digital platforms, they've become these powerful tools
They have.
for shaping public perception,
Mhm.
for mobilizing support,
Yeah.
even coordinating military actions.
It's almost like a whole new dimension of conflict.
I know, right?
One that goes beyond traditional boundaries
Right?
and operates in this digital world,
And that digital battleground is just as important.
if not more so
Yeah.
than the physical one.
It makes you wonder what's next.
Yeah.
What new technologies are they going to come up with?
Hmm.
And how will that change the way we fight wars in the future?
Yeah, it's both exciting and terrifying to think about.
It really is. Technology is a double-edged sword.
It is.
It's constantly reshaping the world
Yeah.
and offering new opportunities, but also the potential for even more destruction.
That's the scary part.
It is, which is why we need to be careful. We need to be thoughtful and responsible, make sure we're using technology for good.
And not for destruction.
Exactly. It's a responsibility we all share.
It is.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We had.
We've explored a lot of different aspects of the Russia-Ukraine war.
From the military strategies to the human cost,
To political maneuvering.
the ethical questions.
We've even talked about the motivations of the key players, the potential for this to escalate, and the chances for a peaceful resolution.
We've highlighted the importance of critical thinking,
Right.
medial literacy,
And having a global perspective.
to help navigate this whole situation.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But like with any deep dive,
Yeah.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
We have. There's always more to learn, more to explore,
Right.
more to discuss.
And that's the best part.
It is. It's an ongoing process.
Right.
So stay curious.
Yeah.
Stay informed.
Mm-hmm.
Stay engaged.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a few things to think about. First, don't forget about the human cost of war.
Right.
Behind the headlines, the political strategies,
Yeah.
there are real people affected by this.
Whose lives are being changed by this war.
And second, keep in mind how history, politics, economics, and even ideology,
Yeah.
they all play a part in international relations.
It's complex.
It is. There are no easy answers.
Yeah.
And it's essential to understand these complexities
Right.
if we want to navigate this whole situation. Third, remember how powerful information is.
It is.
It can really shape public perception and influence what happens.
So be a discerning consumer of information.
Exactly. Look for different perspectives
Right.
and be wary of manipulation.
And propaganda.
And finally, remember that each of us has a role to play
We do.
in building a more peaceful world.
We do, whether it's through supporting humanitarian efforts,
Mhm.
advocating for diplomacy,
Yeah.
or just having thoughtful conversations about these issues. We can all make a difference.
We can. So keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yeah.
keep trying to make a positive impact.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
And until next time, stay curious. Yeah, it's like we talk about all the political stuff and the strategies,
right.
and we forget about the ethical questions.
It's easy to do.
It is. War is inherently a moral dilemma.
It is.
There are no easy answers when it comes to violence
Yeah.
and using force.
And taking human life.
Exactly.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah, and we hear all these reasons for going to war,
Mm-hmm.
but when you strip all that away,
Yeah.
you're left with some tough questions.
You are. Like, when is it okay to use force?
Right, and how much force is too much?
Those are questions people have been asking forever.
Well, yeah, no.
Philosophers, ethicists,
Right.
they've debated this for centuries.
And there's so many other things to consider, too.
Oh, yeah, like how the war is actually conducted.
Right, like how are prisoners treated?
Mm-hmm. Are civilians protected?
Are we doing everything we can to prevent suffering?
It's complicated.
It really is, and it makes you think about everyone's responsibility in these situations.
It does. The people in charge who make decisions about war and peace,
Right.
and regular people who have to live with those decisions.
Like, do we have an obligation to resist wars that are unjust?
Even if it means putting ourselves in danger.
Exactly. And what about other countries?
Should they step in to protect human rights?
Even if it means getting involved in another country's business.
These are tough questions.
They are. It's like this conflict is forcing us to look in the mirror
Yeah.
and face some uncomfortable truths.
About ourselves, about human nature.
About where our morals really lie.
It's a stark reminder that even now, in the 21st century,
With all our technology and progress.
we're still struggling with these basic questions.
About war and peace.
Yeah, it makes you think about how far we've really come.
It does. We have all this technology,
Yeah.
all these systems of government.
But we still haven't escaped violence,
Yeah, or the urge to destroy.
which might just be part of who we are.
Maybe that's the lesson here.
What do you mean?
We shouldn't pretend we've somehow moved past these issues.
Okay.
We should use them as a chance to grow,
To learn from our mistakes.
to do better.
I like that. Instead of getting stuck in this good versus evil story, we need to realize that these situations are complex
Yeah.
and have real conversations
Right.
about how to find solutions.
And those solutions need to prioritize peace
Yes.
and justice.
and human dignity,
We need to remember our shared humanity
even in the middle of conflict.
and hold on to compassion,
Empathy.
respect for everyone.
We're all in this together.
We
Our
are.
fates are tied to each other.
And the choices we make
As individuals,
as global
they
communities
have consequences.
that reach far beyond ourselves.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
It has. We've explored so many sides of this war.
The military side, the politics,
The economics, the human cost,
the ethical dilemmas.
The-
We looked at why the key players are doing what they're doing,
the risks of things getting worse.
the possibility of finding peace,
And we talked about how important it is to think critically,
to understand the media.
to see ourselves as part of a global community.
All these things are crucial for understanding what's going on.
We've covered a lot,
We have.
but like with any deep dive,
You always want to learn more.
I do.
There's always more to explore.
More to talk about.
That's what makes it so interesting.
It does. It's a never-ending process.
So keep that curiosity alive.
Yes, stay informed.
Stay engaged.
Okay, so to wrap things up, here are a few things to keep in mind.
Okay.
First, remember the people affected by this war.
The human cost.
Second, remember that everything is connected.
History, politics,
Economics, ideology.
they all shape how countries interact.
There are no simple answers.
So we need to understand how complicated it all is.
Third, remember that information is powerful.
It can shape how people see the world.
So be careful what you believe.
Look for different perspectives
Watch out for manipulation.
and propaganda.
And lastly, remember that we can all contribute to peace,
We can
support those in need,
speak up for diplomacy.
have important conversations.
We can all make a difference.
Keep learning.
Keep asking questions.
Keep trying to make the world a better place.
That's what matters.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, stay curious.